In my humble opinion, Stranger Things is one of the greatest shows ever made. The show is about kids, teenagers, and adults who deal with abductions, monsters, and government exploits. But it's such a fantastic show because it cares about its characters more than anything else, and never fails to have me locked into every episode. Almost every episode. So I'm going to be starting a series where I go through every episode of the show, reviewing each one of them and placing them on tiers, talking about what I like and very rarely dislike about each one of them, to give you my 2 cents on how great this show is. The tier list ranges from S tier to D tier, and they'll also be ranked within their specific tiers, so by the end you'll have a full concrete ranking of my thoughts on the episodes. And remember, this is just my personal opinion, and you might disagree with a lot of this. You have been warned. Season 1, Episode 1. The Vanishing of Byers. I vividly remember watching this episode for the first time and being absolutely blown away by it. We literally start off with someone running for their lives in a lab, getting taken by the Demogorgon with this insane jump scare, followed by Will riding his bike home from Mike's house and then running for his life from another monster and then disappearing into thin air and then intro. That's literally the first 8 minutes of the show. This to me is the greatest pilot in television history. You could argue, for example, Breaking Bad over this, and while that pilot is amazing, I don't think anything will touch this for me. In introducing you to all of these characters and making you get invested of them, this episode does a perfect job. There isn't a single dull moment, and it always feels like the story is progressing even when this is just the first episode. There's also a lot of intrigue presented because for first-time viewers, they have absolutely no idea who this girl is or what these lab agents are doing in this underground dimension or why they're trying to find this girl. And then also, like, what the happened to Will? I watched this episode when I was 5 years old or something, and I remember being absolutely blown away by what I had just watched. I'm not gonna throw every episode in S tier like it's nothing. This S tier is Stranger Things terms. In fact, most of these episodes would get an S tier if it was normal tier list terms, but I truly believe that this episode deserves an S tier. A perfect way to start off the season and the series as a whole. Season 1, Episode 2, The Weirdo on Maple Street. While not as good as the pilot, this episode is still extremely underrated in my opinion. I forgot how beautiful every scene between Mike and Eleven was, and there are also some really funny scenes between the kids here. It just feels like overall, this episode is why I fell in love with Stranger Things in the first place. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's genuinely crazy how early this show managed to get you so emotionally attached to these characters. Like, when I first watched this episode, I was only 2 episodes in and I was already thinking, if one of these characters die, I'll be really sad. Learning more about Elle in this episode was awesome, and obviously at the end, Barb is taken by the Demogorgon.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
That moment genuinely made me so happy. Like I said, this episode has so many absolutely beautiful moments, and obviously the ending is great too. A tier, super underrated. Season 1, Episode 3. Holly Jolly. From the very first frame, this episode is throwing you right back into the action, with Barb being brutally murdered in the Upside Down. This episode overall just feels like the series kicking into high gear, especially with Joyce talking to Will through the lights. Both of these scenes are absolutely incredible, but the best part of this episode to me is the ending. It's probably the best ending of season 1 to me. The initial reveal that Will is dead sent a wave of shock down my spine, watching it for the first time, as I didn't know what we now know after episode 4. It's absolutely heartbreaking, and the entire montage is arguably a top 10 moment in the entire show. I'm not exaggerating, and if you still don't believe me, watch that scene for yourself. High A tier, really close to S tier. Season 1, Episode 4. The Body. To me, this is probably the most underrated episode in season 1. There's so many absolutely incredible scenes in here, and I'm surprised it's not talked about more. Elle making Troy piss his pants, Joyce talking to Will through the walls while the kids are listening through the Heath kit, the reveal that the body was fake. Get it? The way this scene especially is played out is just masterful. We get to see the badass part of Hopper peek through here as he beats up a bunch of guys to get to the body. But the way we see him contemplating if he really should stab through the body is pretty riveting. The writing is also some of the best in season 1, and the acting takes a step up too. Winona Ryder gives the best performance out of anyone in season 1 to me, and we all saw how amazing she was in Holly Jolly, but here she honestly gets better. I wish I could play the opening scene of this episode, but I can't for copyright reasons, but just watch that scene and tell me she isn't the best actor of the first season. Tell it to my face. I want to hear it. I genuinely believe this episode is a masterpiece. S tier for me, and it's not even a second thought. Season 1, Episode 5. The Flea. To me, this episode doesn't reach the heights of the first 4, and it is probably the weakest episode in season 1. With that being said, is it still a good episode? Absolutely. We see the kids talking to Mr. Clark and trying to figure out how they would get into the Upside Down. And the entire Compass Trail storyline is amazing. The way it all plays out with Lucas and Mike having a fight with Elle, eventually throwing him back with her mind, it's really good stuff. Not to mention the ending of that storyline is pretty heartbreaking, with both Lucas and Elle vanishing, leaving Dustin and Mike alone. I just feel like as a whole, the first 4 episodes were more intense and interesting, and I probably would revisit those as opposed to this if I had the choice. It's still really good though. This one is getting a B tier. Season 1, Episode 6. The Monster. Oh boy, do I even have to explain how good that Corey scene is? First of all, the entire chase leading up to that sequence showcases how generous of a character Mike is, as bro was gonna kill himself to save his best friend's teeth. Regardless, the way the entire scene of Elle's return is constructed with that music, bro, it never fails to send chills down my spine. We also get an amazing fight between Jonathan and Steve, which obviously results in Jonathan getting handcuffed, and I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of rooting for Steve, but it's still really fun overall. This one is getting a high A tier, and that Corey scene is really making me consider moving this to S. Season 1, Episode 7. The Bathtub. The way this episode opens might be the best opening to any episode in Season 1. The van flip scene, one of the best and most iconic scenes in Stranger Things history, happens in the first 4 minutes. It's literally the first 4 minutes. We are getting spoiled, and the show has just never felt more alive. Watch that scene again and you'll know what I mean. The rest of the episode showcases each group of characters coming together to both find Will and Barb. To find both Will and Barb. Barb obviously ends up being dead, but Will is still alive, and the scene where Joyce is communicating with Eleven while Eleven is communicating with Will is just mesmerizing stuff. Not to mention the entire ending sequence with Hopper and Joyce being caught by the lab, and then Will getting captured by the Demogorgon again is incredible. But the van flip sequence, oh my god, that immediately boosts this one to the top of S tier. I know it feels like I'm giving these S tiers out like candy on a Tuesday, but trust me, I'm thinking a lot about these placements. This one deserves it. Season 1, Episode 8. The Upside Down. To me, this is without a doubt the best episode in Season 1. Every single aspect about this finale proves it to be a perfect finale to a perfect season. There are so many hard-hitting moments, and the overlap between the kids' storylines and the Joyce and Hopper storyline makes me tear up every time I watch it. The fight between Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve versus the Demogorgon, not to mention Steve's beautiful character arc in that moment, where he goes from Steve to the best character in the show. Yeah, Steve! Oh my god, Steve! Hopper and Joyce finding Will in the Upside Down, which is arguably one of the best sequences in television history, with Hopper being reminded of his daughter dying, just adding that extra emotional gut punch to the whole thing. Plus, the entire 11 storyline with her making the lab agent's eyes bleed to death, and then killing the Demogorgon and vanishing, making the kids think she's dead, which is even more heartbreaking considering that she thought there was gonna be paradise after all of this was over. I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it, bro. And when the kids reunite with Will, it seems like everything is just fine, with Hopper also putting the Eggos in the woods, signifying that Elle is alive. But then that final scene just hits you like a ton of bricks, ending the episode in the most perfectly shocking way possible. Both cliffhangers were executed perfectly, but even with them, and I know this isn't an original thought, Season 1 could have stood on its own as an 8-episode story, with this being the series finale. It would have been a perfect finale, and it is a perfect finale in every sense of the word. To many, Stranger Things Season 1 is considered the best season of the show, and it's hard to argue with that. While it isn't my personal favorite, I want to say it is more than anything after this rewatch. It's easily the most consistent of the bunch, delivering banger after banger, and sometimes even masterpiece after masterpiece. It's crazy how early this show managed to get you so emotionally invested in these characters, and you love almost every single one of them right off the bat, with a few of them having absolutely beautiful character arcs. This season is a masterpiece, but is it the best season of the show? We'll just have to find out after rewatching the next 3 seasons, and watching Season 5 when it comes out. Like I said, I'll be making videos for every single one of these seasons, so stay tuned for my thoughts on Season 2. Peace out.